Okay, good afternoon. This is Tuesday, April 2022, the meeting of Public Safety Committee, meeting jointly with the Committee on Legislation. It is 4:05 p.m. I would like to first take attendance. I am here. Vice Chair Smith.
Here.
Legislator Alvarado. Legislator, okay. Legislator Barr.
Here.
Legislator Cungio.
Here.
Legislator Johnson. Legislator Pierce. Legislator Woodson Samuels. And Chairwoman Borgia.
Okay, and I will
Here. Sorry, I was muted.
That's all right.
now we'll open legislation. I am here, Vice Chair Gashi. See, Legislator Barr.
Here.
Legislator Boykin. Legislator Cunzio.
Here.
Legislator Johnson. Legislator Marr. Legislator Shimsky. And Chairwoman Borgia.
Here.
Okay, we are open at 4:06 p.m.
Okay, I would like to start off by approving our minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? The minutes are from Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. I'd like to take a vote. Do I have a motion? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Did you see this from it's easy.
All right, I am a yes. Legislator Smith?
Yes.
Legislator Alvarado?
Yes.
Legislator Barr?
Yes.
Legislator
Performance-based rather than coastal.
Legislator Cunzio?
Hey, we'll talk about it. I have some thoughts with it.
Legislator Johnson? Legislator Pierce? Legislator Woodson Samuels? Chairwoman Borgia?
Yes.
Thank you. So this afternoon, we are welcoming guests today. Today, we are joined by members of the Westchester County Corrections Officers Benevolent Association, who will discuss issues that face them on their job. We will also discuss legislation that we support in the state package that raises penalties for sexually touching or assaulting a female corrections officer to a Class A felony. I would like to invite the members to come up. I would like to introduce our guest. Our first guest is the President, Neil Pallone. Please come to the table. Officer Magdalena Genzaroli. Okay. Officer Portia Williams and Officer Carolyn Simons. I would like to also recognize Commissioner Spano, welcome him, and Deputy Commissioner Diaz.
Good afternoon.
Okay. All right. So would you like to say something?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. I know this meeting has been a little while in the making, and we're happy that we have you here today to talk to us about the legislation that, as Chairwoman Clements mentioned, we have supported that's currently pending at the state level, and so we're here to hear from you on it. So.
Welcome once again. We're so glad that you could come out today, and we'd like to hear what you're going to share with us. Okay.
I'm going to start off, okay?
Okay, go right ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Neil Pallone, and I am the president of Westchester COBA. I represent just over 700 of Westchester's boulders. I'd like to say thank you to Madam Chair, Legislator Clements, for accommodating us to be here today, and the rest of the Public Safety Committee. Our department has around 200 uniformed staff that are not only female officers, but they are daughters, mothers, sisters, aunts, and we even have a few grandmothers. And these brave women not only earned our respect, they deserve it. Since bail reform a few years ago, our jail population has changed greatly. Most of the inmates in our care and custody have done something deemed dangerous enough that even under the current reforms, that they still have remanded. Add to this the growing psych population due to many of the state facilities being closed and lack of beds available. Let's just say the amount of sexual harassment, which includes groping, being purposefully exposed to open masturbation, and even threats of gang rape have increased to a very dangerous and frightening level. This afternoon, I'm accompanied by 3 of my officers who are not only brave enough to tell their stories, but are passionate enough to share with you what it's like to work behind the walls of a correctional facility. The events that they will share would all be criminal if they were committed in the outside world, but somehow were brushed aside once they put their uniform on. In or out of the, they wear proudly, first and foremost, they are constituents of New York State and constituents of Westchester County, and their rights need to be protected. The law is the law, and it shouldn't stop at the gates of the Westchester County Jail. Once again, thank you for allowing us this forum, and I introduce to you Officers Ganzaroli, Simon, and Williams. Mr. Ganzaroli, you going to start off?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. I've been with Westchester Corrections for about 8 years now. I started corrections when I was just about 21, 22 years old. I'm personally from Yonkers. I'm a female. I'm used to catcalls. But the direction we're headed in our facility, and I'm sure amongst other facilities, goes way beyond catcalls. Even since my first tour of the building, just walking through the building, I kind of got a taste of what I was getting into. But we've crossed the line from catcalls, which are legal, annoying, but legal, into exposing yourself, masturbating while I'm doing my tours, threatening me that if I walk a tour while you're out of your cell, you're going to rape me. You're going to not only rape me, but you're going to bring other inmates in to take a turn and rape me. And while I can say most of the male officers at our facility, most of our supervisors are very supportive of us, this has been above just our facility. This is above just our county. At this point, we need the state to hear us. This is a bigger issue, especially because we're so restricted on what we can do in return. Keep block is about to be a thing of the past. There is no keep block for 30 days for masturbating, for threatening to throw bodily fluids on me, such as semen. These days are going out the window. It's becoming more focused on rehabilitation. Like I said, I'm from Yonkers myself. I agree there has to be a rehabilitation component in incarceration. However, if a man was on the playground or if a man was on the street and he exposed himself to me, there'd be consequences, including incarceration. There's no additional jail time for these inmates. There's no real sanctions available. They might lose a phone call. They might lose a couple of hours out the day out of their cell, but especially now with halt in place, they're not losing much out of cell time. And it's not just about the sanction part, it's about the safety part. If they're out of their cell 7.5 hours out the day, who's to say they won't make true on those threats that they've given me the whole time that brought them to their cell? Like Officer Pallone was saying, I am a mother, I have 3 children. When I go home, it's hard to decompress at this point from hearing things all day. And after a certain time, writing them up becomes a little redundant. There aren't consequences the way there should be. And like I said, that's above my department's head at this point. This has to go higher up. What can my department do about putting someone on keep block if we're restricted to 15 days keep block and that individual has to be out 7.5 hours out the day? And even with my own personal life, like if I get catcalled on the street, it's a trigger for me. It brings me back to my facility. It brings me back to hearing an inmate in a new jail tell me that he was going to rape me, or seeing an inmate overnight. I did 4 years overnight, masturbate at the window. And we make attempts as women. We want men to know we're a woman on the block. Do not disrespect us. I know personally when I start my tours, I start by making an announcement, female officer on the block. So my presence is here. You have the choice to do whatever you're going to do. And those are the behaviors they choose to engage in.
That's very sad and also shocking in some ways. I volunteered to work in the prison when I was in graduate school, and I was isolated from a lot of things that went on when I walked through to go to the area that I was going to be in. And I couldn't imagine to have to walk in there every single day and then to go through what you're going through, and that complete, absolute disrespect is just uncalled for.
Thank you. And even on a mental health note, we focus a lot on the inmate's mental health. That's what HALT's about. Even after an incident, if an inmate has an incident, they're seen by medical. That's our first priority. Make sure they're okay. They had a fight, make sure they're okay.
Right.
They had an incident with an officer, make sure they're okay. But when these things happen to us, it's like put it on paper, and then it becomes about the inmate. The disciplinary system is about the inmate. What are we doing to the inmate? Nobody says, Officer Simon, you saw a man masturbating last night. Do you need to be seen? Do you need to go out to the hospital? Do you need to see mental health? Our mental health, we have to do 25 years, most of us behind these walls. That's hard enough. But with the added component of being sexually harassed, what happens if we get to a point where we say, you know what? This is post-traumatic stress. I can't do this for the next 14 years. I can't come into work knowing that. Even having a basic conversation, we talk to inmates about their cases, how's your family doing? How are you feeling? That can turn into, I can't wait till I go home so I can try to grab you up in the street. Even a normal conversation. So mental health for us it's also becoming a big issue.
Before we get to the next officer, I also I included, it's the New York State Consolidated Laws, penal law. It's stalking in the third degree, which would be a misdemeanor. It's repetitive stalking of, hey, when you come around, I'm gonna rape you. Or if it's done once or twice, we can now put this into the law. I'm gonna talk to the senators that wrote the bill and try to include that. That would be a misdemeanor charge then, just for the stalking part of it. Yes.
One thing I disagree with is the cat calls. Even that, I can't see why that would be tolerated in this situation where you're trying to. Part of rehabilitation is treat people with dignity and respect. And it's, I guess the big question is how and I guess we're going to hear from the commissioner on his view on how we can change things. That's certainly not the kind of workplace that you should be to that extent. We're part of the same government. We all work, jobs for government.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't be exposed to that.
There's a stigma that, we're in jail. And like I said, most of my male coworkers are very supportive. I have a disciplinary report that I would like to share before the conclusion of the meeting. And when that event happened, I had so many male officers reach out to me. Are you okay? How do you feel? Is everything okay? Even some males will offer to swap spots with you, but that's not always possible. But even with that stigma, I signed up, I gave an oath to Westchester County to protect civilians and also to provide care and custody. No part of that oath said that I should sit there and take a form of verbal abuse, threats of physical abuse, threats of sodomy, threats of rape in order to do my job.
Okay, so Damon, I would like to hear from all officers and then we can discuss things. Okay.
You gonna go, Ms. Simon?
Yes, hi, my name is Officer Simon. I have been in corrections for 15 years, but I've been with Westchester County for 7 years. And what I can say is agreeing with Officer Genzaroli, the character of the inmates that are coming in now it's changed. It's become a lot worse. We get told SMD, which is suck my dick, every day, all the time. When we're not getting told that, we are getting told F you bitch, oh gosh, what else? Some things I don't even want to say because that's how vulgar it is.
Take the gay off of you.
Yeah. Our families are being threatened, our daughters are being threatened. My story is a little different. I was actually groped by an inmate. I work relief shift. I work 11 to 7. My job is to go in and break officers. So I was walking onto a block. It's a pod, working a pod, about 34, 40 inmates on a pod. And I'm going, and they're all out, they're around you. There's no personal space at all.
There's no control bubble.
You have an officer in the bubble, it's you and the inmates, that's it. I'm going in to relieve the officer, and like I said, there's no personal space. They're all around you. I walk in, I'm standing, the computer monitor's there, standing at the desk, officer standing here, inmate is walking up the steps because there's just a railing there. Sorry if I get a little emotional.
Take
It's
your
okay,
time.
it's all right,
Take your
it's
time.
fine, yeah.
Inmate walks up the steps, and the first time I had to look at the video to see what actually happened. The first time they said he reached in, I didn't feel it. The second time I felt him grab, he grabbed my thigh, and automatically I turned around and I pushed him, and he went back, and I just kind of lost it, and I started yelling at him, and the officer that was there walked away. And at that moment, I didn't feel threatened because I pushed him away. I felt violated. I didn't understand why it happened and why it happened to me. I don't go to work to be touched, to be assaulted. I give respect because that's how I was raised. But I do my job. I don't give them anything more than what they should have. And I didn't understand why he felt that was okay. And I'm sorry.
Not Callan.
No, you don't have to apologize.
You don't have to apologize at all.
But those are the type of things that we deal with. And what I didn't like is how it was handled. I'm sorry.
Okay, take your time.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah.
I'm still not okay with it.
Yeah. You can take a minute and sit down, you know, you can always, yeah.
Next,
So,
hold on one second.
Yeah.
Ms. Williams is one of the main reasons why we're here today. She's spearheaded this for, how long ago, about 2 years ago? About 2 years ago, I was getting the calls on
Over and over.
over and over about
Okay.
different incidents. This is when I said to myself, something needs to be done, and that's where we started this movement.
Okay, so how often would you say these things are happening on a daily, weekly? How often do you think these incidents are happening?
So honestly, it's no way to tell
Okay.
because to me it could happen. It happened maybe every 2 weeks. I would say that it happened. But then the thing is that I would also speak to other female officers, and it was happening to them.
Right.
The thing about it is that we don't have enough communication. And as we are briefed on the things that are going on, that have went on in the jail, we come in 5 minutes extra or earlier before our shift to find out, was there a fight? Was there something that we should know about? And I've noticed that every time, it's never anything about what I wrote up. It's never anything about this inmate has sexually harassed this officer, or to be aware that this person is sexual abuse or he's abusive anyway. And I've said things to people, and they said, "Well, that's not something that needs to be said at briefing," but it is, because I wasn't aware of Officer Simon's issues. I wasn't aware of Officer Gaines-Aroli's issues. I'm aware of certain things because I take the initiative and I go out and I speak to other female officers because I knew the things that I was going through. And I understood that for many of them, they didn't feel empowered by the department. And it was basically that their morale was broken and their spirits were broken. And I feel that that's very easy to happen because they were writing things up and nothing was coming of it. And I've had my own situations where I've said that I called the supervisor and I said, I'm going to write this person up. And they say to me, well, I mean, yeah, if you're going to write them up, you can. Nothing's going to happen right now. Or, you know, they just take a very lackadaisical approach as if it's not an issue. But it's a very large issue. And I think that the problem is that people aren't understanding that it's a major issue and it's something that is affecting the female officers in a very negative way. I've asked, to go back, I only have 3 years experience in corrections, period. I've not worked anywhere else other than Westchester County, so I have nothing else to go off of. However, the first time that this has ever happened to me, that someone exposed themselves, it was, I was on a pod, it's in the new jail, and I was doing one of my last tours. So one of the things that we did was collect commissary papers from people, so that they were able to get commissary and food items on a whatever day. So I was walking around, and then someone called me to their cell, and it was under the pretense that he wanted to give me his commissary paper. So the door is locked, and so he's standing at the door, and I'm waiting for him to hand me the paper. So now he's like signing, and he's doing something with the paper, and I'm wondering, what's taking you so long? Why isn't he giving me the paper? Because if I don't give this paper in today, he's not going to get his commissary the next day. So now I'm waiting, and then I realize that he has his penis out. And so he's called me back over so that he can expose himself to me. And the first time that it happened, I never told anyone because I was a brand new officer and I was scared to death. I was scared of what others were going to think of me if I was being that friendly officer that likes inmates. What was the reason that somebody would think to do this to me? I felt that it was my fault. I felt that I have maybe smiled inappropriately. Maybe, I don't know. I thought that it was me because at no point in time had anyone ever said to me, you know what, someone may have done this. Someone may do this. This is my story. This is what happened to me. No time in the training in the academy was I aware that this is a thing that inmates do. It wasn't until I spoke to my brother, and my brother was actually someone, he had been incarcerated upstate, downstate, Westchester County Jail, all of these different places. I spoke to him about it because I was too ashamed to speak to anybody else about it because I thought they were going to blame me. And he said to me, you never take that. That's not something that's ever okay. You always write it up and you let someone know because God forbid anything happens to you outside, because when I took the test, it said that you have to be a Westchester County resident. And when I started, the inmates that we were taking were Westchester County residents. That's why they were there. So if I were to go outside and something happened to me, it's very likely that I could see this person. I'm living in Mount Vernon. Our inmates are Mount Vernon, Yonkers, White Plains, Greenburgh. So it wasn't until I spoke to my brother, who is a felon. He pushed me and he was on my back. Never let that happen. It's never okay. Because I was thinking, is this a jail thing? Is this something that happens? And he assured me that it wasn't. So from that moment is when I said, I will never not write it up. And once I saw that inmate again, I felt uncomfortable. Instead of me being the officer that is here to make sure that the safety and the security and the good order is met in the facility, I was now nervous. I was looking around, wondering who knew that this happened to me. Who had he told? Who may try this again because I didn't say anything. I didn't speak up. The thing about it is that too much of what we go through is discretionary. So we're here because we want to take things out of other people's hands. The things that happen to me, it's discretionary upon whether the sergeant thinks it's important, whether the captain thinks it's important. It's under their discretion what happens, because I've had captains deal with things differently. I've had sergeants deal with things differently. And it's amazing that Ganzaroli has been able to say that she's had a lot of people support her. And I've had other people thinking, do you think that it was on purpose? And so I say to them, has it ever happened to you? And do you know how many male officers it's happened to? Can you guess?
No.
Zero. So my classmates, I've asked them, how many times have you seen someone indecently expose themselves to you on purpose? They've not seen anyone do it on accident. So for someone to ask you, a colleague of yours, to ask you, do you think that it was on purpose? Of course it was on purpose, because everything is timed. These people know once you see me, it's 3:00. Once you see me again, it's 3:30, because that's how we do our rounds. We do it strategically. Once you lock into your cell, you know that I have 2 more times to come past your cell. So I don't know how many of these DRs I've written at 10:30. At 10:30, because they know 10:30 is your last chance. I've had people that I've written up, and you're looking through the glass and you see these things. I've written people up, and they've went to the DR board and had a witness say that it's impossible for me to have seen that, because they were talking to them through the vent in the concrete wall. Which is amazing that someone would think to take merit into that. But the fact that he was able to bring a witness to his trial, but I'm not privy to come and speak my piece, it's amazing to me.
Other than writing up these incidents, what disciplinary actions are currently being imposed on these inmates that do this?
When it first happens, nothing. It's been a time that I've written someone up at 3:30. So I get into the building, I'm 3 to 11. I got in the building at 3:00. I got to my post 3:00. 3:30, I wrote someone up. And so now, of course, because this person decided that they were going to pretend to read the paper. So he has a paper in one hand and then his penis in the other hand, and he's masturbating. So I walk past, and I'm flabbergasted, because at 3:30, this has never happened to me. 10:30, but 3:30. So now, later on, about 4:30, 5:00 is day room time. I do not let this inmate out. The sergeant comes on post because I immediately called and I let them know I'm writing this person up. I never give them, I think I might write them up. I'm writing them up just so you are aware that you are going to have paperwork and things to do. So I get the sergeant to come. The sergeant comes and says, where are they? In the cell. And he says, why? Because where else would he be after he sexually harassed me? Where else would he be? And so he says, well, the captain said you have to let him out, and he will have early day room, meaning that he will lock in early. And I said to the sergeant, who is he going to come out with? Because I'm not going to be here if this person is out. Because no one's realizing that I've been sexually harassed. All they know is that the inmate is supposed to have day room time. It's supposed to have a certain amount of time. He forfeited that when you broke a law in a jail. But that's the part that no one is understanding. And that is a clear sign that no one feels that is important They don't ask you, are you okay? They don't go and speak to the inmate immediately. This is hours later. It happened at 3:30. This is now 5 o'clock. You're coming and asking me, where's the inmate? Someone should be up to speak to them. Someone should be up to speak with me. And of course, if nothing else, you should realize that I should not be on that block, or the inmate should not be on that block. But they say that it's not okay. They cannot penalize them until they have been seen by the board.
Okay, I have a question. So are there any mental health services available for corrections officers when these things happen?
We do have the Blue Foundation. However, the Blue Foundation is currently, correct me if I'm wrong, run by a male captain. That particular male captain, Captain Martinez, I feel like he's great, but has he been in my shoes as a woman? Absolutely not. And even so, the Blue Foundation is more broad for mental health issues. It's not sexually based, sexual harassment based. There's no one, like I said, there's no immediate aftercare. This is an incident. If I see someone expose themselves, as Officer Williams was saying, I shouldn't wait 2-3 hours before something's done for the inmate, but even then, the whole procedure becomes strictly about the inmate. The disciplinary report I'm going to share, immediately after this incident happened, this was at 11 o'clock. Officer Simon and I, at one point, we were midnight officers, which is even worse because when you go to say this inmate did this, that, or the third, they say, well, it's midnight. How do you know that he didn't know you were coming? Or how do you know that it was that inmate in particular? Even though, after a while, I've been in this building for 8 years. You see repeat offenders. I know what so-and-so sounds like. I know what this inmate sounds like. And when I'm doing my tour and I'm directly in front of his cell speaking to him, I also know who I'm speaking to. At 11 o'clock, I came in. The incident happened. 11:05, I walked into the housing control behind my block, and I let the sergeant know on the desk that I was not physically capable of hitting any more rings on that block. I didn't care if they moved me next door, across the hall, but I just had my fill. And I was told, okay, we're sending someone up. 11:30, my next tour is due, or my security ring's late. Nobody's there to relieve me yet. I call downstairs and let them know again, I can't go in there. I'm shaking. At this point, I might have to go to the hospital because I can't bear the thought of going in there. And as a woman, I'm just thinking, when I walk up the stairs, they're gonna look at my body. When I hit that tour, after all the threats they just made, they're looking at my body. They're planning what they're gonna do to me. And you feel almost as if they are doing it to you at that point. Around 11:45, I was relieved from my post. I was sent across the hall to a block that's very similar. And I was told later on that night by my female sergeant that when she was informed, she was actually very shocked at the report. She was great about it. She as a woman asked me if I wanted to go press outside charges on this inmate for the things he said to me, the threats of rape. I declined because I said, there's no way somebody's going to take a look at this disciplinary report and find him not guilty. There's no way. It's not going to happen. I have enough faith in my department. And sure enough, he was found not guilty with no sanctions. So she had informed me that the desk sergeant had let her know that I was being dramatic to come see me when she got the chance. And that's why she had came up so late, because she was busy and she had other things to do, and it was relayed to her as if I was being dramatic. I would like to share the disciplinary report. It is explicit. I'm sorry if I offend anyone in advance.
Okay.
I mean, in all honesty, like, it's the things are explicit, and if it's hard for you to hear, imagine it being done to you.
And like I said, I've been in this building for 8 years. I've heard and I've seen so many things. Like we make jokes. You never know. You always say never, but there's no never in corrections. Something can always happen that you would never think would happen. I have very thick skin, I would like to believe, but this night I just said, you know what? I believe I had maybe 6 years on the job, and I said I just had my fill. So this is my report. Upon walking into 2 Southeast for the start of my tour, inmate Jones yelled out, "Look at this, she's got a fat ass." I gave inmate Jones a direct order to stop harassing me and to settle down. He responded, "You go ahead and write that ticket real good, baby. I'm gonna rub it on my dick when I get it." He also stated, "That pussy's probably real wet, but I'm going to get you pregnant through your asshole," amongst other several vulgarities. Inmate Jones was able to get the majority of the block, and again, there's about 44 inmates on a block, to join him in yelling, "Fuck her in the booty hole. I hope that ass is real, and wait until she walks for her next ring. She's coming." Inmate Jones told me that he had something for me on my next tour and that I could suck his dick so he could come on my face. Inmate Jones yelled to me, "Don't work days, baby." And at this point, we were getting forced as midnight officers quite frequently to work days. Or we'll gangbang you. Inmate Jones did not comply with any orders to stop.
So, what can the county do to make your work environment safer? Is there anything that we can do to help you? Because I think this is just, over the top and something really needs to be done.
Can I just,
Go right
I've
ahead.
been asking for this on a state level.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you guys can help us out on the county level.
Yes.
If you're violent in jail, right, you have a violent inmate program, we should have sexual deviant programs. So if I'm the type that I can't control masturbating when Miss Williams comes on my block, one ticket, okay, you get 2 tickets. At some point, they have to be removed from the general pop and maybe put into, and in jail, you're not welcome really to be into a sexual predator. It's not something you want to be labeled.
Right.
So that might end a little bit of itself. I just wanted to bring one thing up with the masturbation part too. They have like, their toilets are inside their cells as well, right? You don't see them go number 2 in the toilet. You know why? Because they put a thing up, so because everybody wants their privacy. So for the story of, you just caught me by accident. No, you didn't. Because if you want to masturbate in private, put your curtain up so they don't have to see you. So it's purposeful, especially when, again, sometimes they might do it in bed. When somebody's standing at your cell door and they're looking at you eye to eye and they're doing that, that's sexual deviance. That,
To add on to what he said about we have a violent offender program. So I've worked that program and I've been sexually harassed twice on that program. And at that program, they also have civilians that come in, which are tasked with running programs with them, speaking with them. They it's kind of a therapeutic situation where they share experiences, I guess, why they're violent or what makes them angry. And when I made my DRs, their workers weren't notified because it's a program where if they pass this program, they get less time on their sentence. And it looks good to the courthouse and to the judge. So now, if I'm telling you that not only is he a violent offender, he's also a sexual deviant, it's negligent for you not to let that be known to the judge or to whoever is in charge of this program. Because like everyone keeps on mentioning, jail is supposed to be rehabilitative. If we are ignoring the issues that are going on, which is that some of these people are sexual deviants, and it may have been something that they were doing outside, it may have been something that they just learned in jail. It's negligent for us to now put these people back on the street, knowing that they've added something to their criminal toolbox. Because now, once I have my paperwork, if someone were to find out, oh, they've been doing this in jail and now they've went and raped a woman, it's just that we've emboldened them to move on to something else.
Right. So the legislation that's at the state level right now, how can this help this situation?
I think with consequences, behavior sometimes stops, right? So if we can, like I said, I'm gonna speak on the state level, the stalking part. So we're fortunate, the groping in this place is minimal compared to state facilities. So thank God for that nature. A lot of our harassment is, again, sexual masturbation, the threats of rape, and that falls under this, which would be a misdemeanor. But if somebody's in there and they know they're getting out in 3 months because they did whatever, and they have another 6 months, that may curtail it. You know what I'm saying? And then if you got a second misdemeanor on that, maybe it goes up to a felony charge. But there has to be some consequences.
But as I said before, you know, since I've been in corrections, I've always said never say never. I've seen things in there, I've seen people eat their feces, I've seen people do things you would never even think to do. So never say never, because us as women, even as men, all of our officers, we go into that jail with just a body alarm. That's it. So never say never. You know, the groping might be minimal, but there's going to be that person
Definitely.
who needs mental health treatment or even just doesn't and gets the urge and tries to pull one of us in a cell with them one day with just that body alarm. And they know what that alarm is for. So if I were them, the first thing I'm going for is take that body alarm off of her. And they will plan. They make a false fight, make somebody think they're fighting so the attention's on the fight, and then grab Officer Williams. Never say never. And like Officer Williams said, you know, I'm from Yonkers. I just recently moved to Dutchess County because I can't go to the supermarket and see 10 inmates that threatened to rape me last week. I just can't do it. As far as what the county can do, I do believe this is at a state level. We're losing a lot of ability to sanction these inmates. The least we can do is possibly make our female officers more open to pressing outside charges. If someone exposes themselves outside, okay, I can't put them on keep block, but guess what? You just added a charge to your sentence now. If you've exposed yourself outside, you'd go on the sex offender registry. You should be if you're incarcerated too. You don't go into complete lawlessness when you come into jail. It's called corrections. We're supposed to be correcting your behavior, not enabling it once you come into our walls. And like I said, you know, SVU and stuff, when rapes happen to victims often say the attention went completely on the perp. And the same thing happens to us. You know, we go through the disciplinary system, but where's our mental health? What happens when we start saying, I can't come back to work? I shake when I walk into certain blocks. If I see certain inmates, I shake. If I even know somebody's coming, my body goes into fight or flight, and I can be in the easiest post in the jail and I'm in a full sweat and I feel exhausted just from my body's reaction to this gentleman here. So that's, I think when it comes to the county, you know, mental health definitely.
Right.
Support of our female officers, but I believe this is definitely on a state level now at this point. We need to be able to pursue charges.
Okay, Legislator Alvarado, did you have a question?
No, not a question, but first of all, I want to thank the officers for sharing their sad experiences with us. This is unbelievable to me that this is actually happening at this level. But I think we need a plan of action. How many of us know of stories of people that we fear just because they're intense people? Never mind, they're in jail and they still make me afraid. So how can we partner with the state to begin to penalize this behavior? Yes, please.
Chairwoman Clements, I would like to respond a little bit, please.
Yes, Commissioner Spano, go right ahead.
Always nice to meet with all of the county legislators, and I too would begin by thanking our 3 female correction officers for publicly talking about some of their very difficult and horrific situations. Few points I want to make, and at no time will I make an excuse for any type of poor behavior from any of our residents. It is upsetting to me to hear that our female correction officers did not receive the support and proper guidance from our supervisors. As Neil Pallone, who is sitting right there, will tell you, that's unacceptable behavior for me. And generally, when something of that nature occurs, it's brought to my attention. What our female officers testified to regarding the disciplinary procedures being watered down to the point where they serve as very little deterrent right now, that is accurate, especially with the recent passage of HALT. the verbal abuse in a correctional setting, regardless of the fact that, we operate under the very best standards in the country. We go to great lengths to protect every level of our workforce and our residents. We have 1,300 cameras in place. We do have a body alarm system, but even when a resident is disciplined and is cell-bound, he or she is not prohibited from espousing some of these horrible things. And that's where you can help us. Neil talked about stalking in the third. That recommendation came from us after we reviewed this bill. We don't think it addresses the core issues that were discussed here today. We have to have legislative protections in place that will serve as a deterrent for this type of verbal abuse and threats and sexual in nature to our female correction officers. Right now, we have to lean on our internal disciplinary processes, which continue to be watered down. So that's where you can help us. I actually think it should go beyond stalking in a third, and it should be a real collaborative effort to specifically address. And when I say collaborative, I include the DA's office because they're the individuals who will be processing these cases. And they have been a great partner in recent years to process, assault cases, because over time, and I'm proud to have participated in this, we have increased the penalties for assaults on correction officers. And we have a DA who's willing to process those cases. And I have no doubt she would be willing to process these cases, but we have to get this legislation correct. Internally, I will meet myself and DCDS. As always, we meet with the union leadership all the time. If they feel that there's a breakdown as it relates to our disciplinary procedures or providing support to our correction staff, we want to know about it. And Neil will tell you, we react immediately. We don't want anybody coming into our workplace uncomfortable or fearing to take a post. That's not how we function here. But the reality of it as well, and every correction officer who I speak to in an academy, I will tell them, you're entering one of the most complicated professions there is. And that's a correction officer in general, because they will be subjected to verbal abuse and things of this nature. Being a female correction officer and working with male residents takes that to a new level. So we not only support legislative enhancements and protections in these areas, we recommended stalking in the third, but we don't think it goes far enough.
All right, thank you for that.
If I can just piggyback, I'm sorry, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
okay, go right ahead.
Commissioner Spano and Deputy Commissioner Diaz, they're correct. When I sent them the state legislation, they helped speak to the DA and try to look for avenues that we can charge inmates. Because again, you can't just wait for groping and touching, because that, what we're hearing about it, it's too late. So thanks to the two commissioners, they're the ones that sent this to me the other day, and we produced it. So thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, I would like Legislator Smith would like to go now.
Thank you, and thank you for again coming in and being willing to share your stories with us. Thank you, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner, for joining us as well. And Neil, for being the driving force behind getting us here today, along with Officer Williams, of course. And I think what strikes me probably the clearest of everything that's been said here today is when, remind me of your last name.
Ganzaroli.
Officer Ganzaroli said, if you were to say this or do these things outside of a correctional facility, you'd be arrested for it. And if it's in fact true that we are continually trying to improve the rehabilitative nature of corrections, then it would also seem to me to make sense.
Can I make a comment?
We want to create environments where, you know, this behavior is less likely to happen inside a correctional facility, as opposed to right now where it seems, like you said, it's basically kind of a free-for-all, and it's more likely to happen. Now, of course, in a perfect world, you know, lots of things would be different, but obviously that's the direction that we need to be moving in. It's one that I think certainly, certainly I am supportive of. Senator Clemens, and I think most of us are. And so, with respect to this this item here, is this sort of a request to incorporate more like a greater penalty for the stalking? Because the stalking is obviously, it's already a crime under the penal law, but
Would like to put that into behind the walls. You know, the stalking inside there is the same stalking from the street, so
Right.
we'd like to
Exactly.
see it put into the legislation.
that it be
I'm with you.
It would be, yeah, it would be a misdemeanor charge. I
okay.
just want to add one thing as well. We talk about keep lock, and I'm not sure if everybody knows what keep lock is here. What's that?
No, I was gonna
Oh.
say some of the language that was
Yes.
used was
Oh,
clearly
sorry, jail
jargon.
jargon,
but-
yes.
Yes.
Some inmate, Officer Williams catches an inmate masturbating, she writes a ticket, a disciplinary report. Even if they're found guilty, they'll lose $25 a fee, and they're,
Sometimes.
And they'll have a friend by them
and they,
commentary.
Mm.
and they used to be held keep lock, which was you were out for rec and you were out for an hour a day. So you had a penalty to pay. With some of the state legislation and the friendliness to the inmate population in a way, again, the deterrent's gone, right? So now, Halt just got passed. DC, if you don't mind me asking, how long do they have to be out of a cell now on keep lock?
1.5 hours.
So 7.5 hours, but Neil, if I can comment quickly, you know, and it's important to note, in 2012, the Department of Justice passed, they promulgated standards on, it's called Prisoner Rape Elimination Act, right? And while this act is really important to prevent sexual abuse, it really just protects the inmates, right? It protects against inmate on inmate assault, it protects against staff on inmate assaults, not just sexual abuse, but sexual harassment, voyeurism, right? So it calls for, it demands outside charges, and then if an officer is found guilty, there's a presumption of termination, right, in a hearing. On the flip side, there wasn't a thought process to put those protections in for officers, right? We have a lot of charges that you can charge, but they involve some kind of touching, right? Forcible touching, rape. The public lewdness laws, if I was to masturbate in the street, don't apply to a cell because there's this expectation of privacy within a cell, even though we know they're doing it, like the officer said, they're timing it, right? So there's really no penalty. Then we go to, well, we can't charge them on the outside, we'll write them up for disciplinary charges. And where Neil said it was 23-hour lockdown and an hour of hygiene,
And
then it
loss
went,
of privileges.
and loss of privileges, then it went to 4 hours out of cell, and you couldn't take away their privileges. And then now recently with Holt, you let them out 7.5 hours a day, right? So the average individual gets 10 out. The average individual that doesn't commit an offense gets 10 hours out of his cell. But this guy who just threatened to assault an officer, right, sexually, comes out for 2.5 hours less for the day, right? So what is the consequence really?
There are nothing.
So I know there's a couple of the legislators want to speak,
Yeah.
but just the last thing I'll just say is, additionally to the fact that what's not tolerated on the outside should be less tolerated on the inside. I also think, it's important to recognize that, especially female officers who sign up to do this job, have a right to go into a workplace where they're not under threat of sexual assault, harassment, exposure, and all the other things that go along with that. And I think the idea, or at least, sometimes I think, there's this sense out there, well, this is just how it is. And so, this is just, but I want to say to you, I do not believe that for 1 second. I don't think that you should I have, a couple of your coworkers who I live, live a few doors down from me. I see him, I talk with him quite frequently, and I know the type of work you do, but you deserve to be treated with the same respect and not be subject to the same violence, whether it's physical or otherwise, as as anybody else. So definitely support you in that as well.
Thank you. Legislator Barr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, first of all, thank you to the corrections officers who were here, who've told us their stories. Obviously, that sounds very traumatic. And as you've heard, nobody here thinks that is appropriate and that you should be treated that way. I also want to add just my little personal story, which I've told at this table before. My sister works in a state forensic mental health facility, and I've heard stories from her from there about people who work there being attacked, and of course in that scenario they're even less, I think, they're being treated with more sort of freedom than in a prison setting. So it is definitely a difficult situation that has not been figured out yet. Having said all of that, because we are a county legislature and not a state legislature, these are not the kinds of things that most of us know a lot about in terms of what the laws are, what they've been, what conversations there have been. We did support, and the reason we told you we're coming is because we did support the state making tougher laws that would help protect corrections officers like yourselves. So we do support that. But again, these are not the laws that we make. We can only say, hey, we think this is a good idea. And I'm a little confused about some of the things I heard. For example, if I heard correctly, I think one of the first things you said, Mr. Pallone, was something about bail reform. And I haven't heard how this is connected to bail reform at all. So is there some connection that you believe there is to the changes in the bail law that have made this worse or contributed to this? Because I don't understand that, and I would like to if that's the case.
Sure.
Again, that's not our law, but I certainly would like to know how you think it's connected.
Yes, how it's connected is jail, before bail reform, people were remanded for other certain crimes, right? So you had a percentage of dangerous criminals, you had a percentage of this, X, Y, and Z. Those people are in the street. And we're not saying, hey, they shouldn't be in the street, but you're now concentrated. Your jail population are people now that are serious enough to be remanded. So these housing units, because we've been at this table before and we talk about staffing levels, right? So the staffing levels of all these dangerous people together are like a powder keg for my officers that walk around and ready to go boom. You can't dilute with the less serious, dangerous criminals. So does that make where the bail reform comes in?
I understand what you're saying. So, and it's not like, so it's more sort of condensed and
It's concentrated.
Concentrated.
And
okay.
if we try to spread it out, I'm sure at a different legislation meeting, we would hear, why do you have so many officers and can't you condense them and concentrate the dangerous people together?
Right. So, okay. So now I understand what you're talking about. The other thing that I didn't understand is obviously when these changes, and I'm not that familiar with HALT either. I mean, I forget, I know it. If somebody wants to just remind me what that is, HALT.
So HALT is humane alternative to solitary confinement. So it came about years ago. It was really a DOC prison system failure where they were putting guys in shoes, special housing units, for months and years. That was never being done in the county jails, but when the law was passed, county jails were thrown into that, right? And had to suffer the consequences of all that halt required, which is 7.5 hours out of cell.
Got it. Okay. And you know, and we've certainly heard, you know, why that's considered more humane and so forth, and that makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is when these laws were passed by the state and when they were, you know, made applicable to the county, were these discussions had with our state representatives? I mean, I can't imagine this is the first time that this is being discussed at a table. So I'm curious what has happened with the state, because this is certainly something that should be discussed with those legislators.
Yeah, from the onset of all of the new confinement regulations, and you know, we have collaborated with all of the New York State jails and the New York State Sheriff's Association, and raised our concerns throughout the entire process. And we have collaborated directly with the State Commission of Correction, and as recently as last week, to articulate our concerns and the potential operational impact, as well as the safety impact on our staff and residents. So, but it didn't seem to make a difference. So and you know, I mean, everybody on this call understands how we feel about rehabilitation and what we do in terms of programs and services, but we need to have the right balances in place, because we do have a complicated environment. We do have a lot of folks, as articulated earlier, who were struggling with serious mental illness, and you all know about all we do to treat those individuals, more so here than probably any other jail in New York State, but that doesn't cut off that poor behavior that has been discussed here today. So this, again, I think the stalking 3 is critically important, but I think with the right collaboration with the DA's office, we could implement other changes to this legislation that would directly impact what's going on, you know, at the local jail level, some of which was articulated here today by our 3 female correction officers.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that's something that definitely needs to be done. And I want to assure the 3 female corrections officers and anybody else that you work with that I cannot imagine there is anybody, including the people who, you know, advocate very strongly for the prisoners, and I guess prisoners is not the right, whatever the word is, you know, that would accept this behavior towards you as being okay. I mean, I think what happens with so many things, unfortunately, in our society today is that things become polarized and there isn't a real conversation about, you know, about striking the right balance. And I think that's what I believe you're talking about, Commissioner. You know, we need to strike a balance here, and clearly it hasn't been struck, but it needs to be. And so I certainly support these conversations, and obviously, if there is something we can do at the county level, we certainly, you know, are interested in helping to make that happen, because it certainly isn't acceptable for you to put up with what you're putting up with.
Thank you. Legislator Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first thing I just want to mention is that outside of the Board of Legislators and the County Executive's Office, the Department of Corrections is second in Westchester County behind DSS as the most diverse department that we have. One, not just with regard to male, female, but also with regard to racial makeup. And so that needs to be understood and needs to be recognized, that we have a large number of women who are doing this job and compared to other places in county government, and that needs to be taken into account. The other thing that I want to say that is Neil and I have had conversations about how the work that you all do is different than other law enforcement officers, that it literally is, you are when a police officer, for example, is walking down the street, most of the people that they walk past are good citizens who have not made bad choices, mistakes, so on and so forth. But the work that you all do, when you walk down the block, you are walking past individuals who have made bad choices, who have made mistakes, and that is everyone with the exception of your colleagues for the most part. And so as we continue to have conversations, we'll continue to talk about how mental health challenges that affect the general population reflect in the jail system, how things as bail reform, which I'm glad that Madam Vice Chair, you asked that question because that gave some context, because it was unclear for people like myself as to how the work that you all do is challenging. To the officers, I just want to say thank you, because this is wild. Like, and sure, in your imagination, like you could kind of think up this stuff and you would say never, that wouldn't actually, you know, but like to hear your stories, your experiences told at this table and shared with us is just beyond anything I could have imagined. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for the courage to do it. And thank you for going back to work day and day and day after that, because I'm not sure how many people, after having an experience like you all have had, would then wake up the next day and choose to continue to do that work. It's been said many times already that this is a state law, so I'm not even going to deal with that. I want to talk about this from a county perspective and something, and forgive me, I was driving, so I was more listening than seeing who was saying what comments, but it was talked about how at the change of tour, there are, I'm an educator, so I'm going to say announcements. Is that the right language?
You announce yourself. When you come on the
No,
block.
so that there were like announcements, like what's happening with the general.
There was briefing.
Briefing,
It's a
see?
briefing.
Okay.
Briefings,
Yeah.
not announcements. Okay.
Yes, so it's a briefing.
That there are briefings, and so is it possible, just exactly what was discussed, I believe, at this table, Commissioner, to make sure that every officer is aware of who these individuals are, so that they can be aware, at the very least, that, you know, as I walk past this cell, as I interact with this inmate, this resident, that I'm prepared in whatever way one would prepare themselves for something so crazy. Is that possible for something like that to be included? I mean, just the small things that we could do to make the work experience better.
We're happy to take a look at that on our end, and get what relevant information we can into that 5-minute period. But in addition to that, you know, I want everybody to understand that there's a handoff when a correction officer takes a housing unit, and there's a collaboration there. And they talk about what occurred on that day, they talk about the count, they talk about, you know, events of this nature. So there is, in addition to the briefing, there's a communication and handoff when a correction officer takes over a housing unit. But that's something we'll certainly take a look at.
I appreciate that, Commissioner, because the one thing that we know about work, period, no matter where you work, is that a culture is developed. And so, sure, I could warn an individual officer that this is the experience that they might have as we hand it off. But if this is included from the top, and this is what we talk about, this is how we talk about it and how we discuss it, then that will hopefully permeate through not just for female officers, but for every officer to understand the importance of things like this and making sure that they don't have to guess who's gonna have their back as they have these experiences, that they're gonna know that from the top, this is something that is serious and is taken seriously, and we are going to pay attention to. And so that's how we begin to change a culture. And it is my hope that I'm part of that for our departments, as our county as a whole, the corrections department, but also specifically for you 3 officers and every other female officer who is experiencing what you all are.
Thank you.
It's if I may, and it's a good idea, information, you know, any additional information we can get out is always helpful. But changing a culture is gonna come with legislative change. because there needs to be a significant downside to this type of behavior.
One thing that Legislator Johnson you brought up, and a good suggestion to the commissioners, is we have J rosters. You know, it's a jail roster, right? And it has alerts. We'll have an alert that he's a psych, he's a gang member, he's a whatever. Maybe we have to put maybe a code, a sex offender, but have it as a Y as opposed to a, so that if God forbid another inmate looks at it, you don't want to put somebody at harm, but then we need to know, he's got caught out there with, he's on sex offender status. And maybe you got a time period you're on it, but that's not a bad idea. I don't think that,
We do it with splashers for inmates who splash fluids on officers or are assaultive. They have an A next to the name for assaultive. I'm not sure if we still use that system, but we did at one point. Also, sanctions are jobs. The man who I read that disciplinary report from, he's a trustee. He's making county money after the way he behaved. You should lose your ability to have a job. Phone calls, we can't enforce confinement, but who's to say you can have day room time? Tier time is still time out your cell. Rec time is still time out your cell. I mean, sure, there's gonna have to be some day room component to squeeze 7.5 hours in the day, but a privilege of a phone call at a later time, no.
And just so, some of those things, right, are things that we have control over. And so while I am fully in support of this law, this amendment to this law, and the changes that have been discussed as well, like, what can we do?
I think a big part of it is taking the discretion out of it.
Yes.
And I've found that when you give a captain the discretion to say that this can happen, then that's when you are impeding on others' rights. That's when you are dumbing down the morale. That's when you're taking something from me, because you're saying, well, it's okay that you get sexually harassed because it doesn't affect you. But like what they were saying, what Gansroli and Palone were saying, we have J-Rosses, but also when offenders come into the building, they go through a whole booking process where they are seen whether they would be a predator, whether they show signs of being a predator, or whether they may be easily victimized. So based on that status, that's how they get their status. So we have things such as AA, which is one of the worst inmates, or AAA, that would be the worst inmates. AA is less. A, lesser than that. B, lesser than that. So now if you're maybe a B, you're able to have certain jobs. If you're a AA, you can have certain jobs on your pod. And if you're a AAA, they don't really have jobs.
Yeah, they can't work.
So it should be something that maybe is a sliding scale. If I say that this person has done this, now we reevaluate you and see whether your status fits you still at this time. And depending on who you are, a lot of the inmates, they want to write a letter. Can I have my status changed? Because they need money. They need to have a job. But being that they're a AA, it doesn't work for them. They can't work. So I think that that's a thing. That's a big thing for us because, it's a deterrent, but it also helps the officers to have an understanding whether, you know how it is when you go to a briefing, you may forget to say something because what if you had a fight? What if you had something else? And we're doing the hand-to-hand, and you may not think that it's pertinent to me. So if it's a male officer, he may not think that it's important. It's not important to him. So he doesn't say that. And so many times it goes around that you hear all these stories and you're like, that happened to you? Or even this person that she says, Stephen Jones, I know the name. And it's like, he did that to you? Because you see different things in different people and they present themselves in different ways. So you don't know that you're speaking to someone that is predatory. And I think that that's a piece that's missing. It's the communication, but it's something that it's not fun to talk about. It's not something that's easy to talk about. It's not something, it's more of a taboo thing. And what it should be is us really embracing that this is something that's going on, and the only way to change it is if we speak about it and if we make it known that this is not okay. When everyone's being quiet, then it's just something that's getting pushed under the mat, and another person is suffering and another person.
Thank you for that. Legislator Kunzio.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say to all of those that shared their story, I am so sorry that that happened to you. And thank you for having the courage to come forward to share those stories. I think you make a very good point. I think that we have taken consequences out of society, and it's not just in the jail setting. You're seeing this all over. I'm definitely in support of this legislation, and I feel that maybe the best way to get the message across is to have someone walk a mile in your shoes. Have somebody go on a tour with you. Have them accompany you on your shift and have them see exactly firsthand what goes on. Because I remember as a former school teacher, people had no idea what was going on in the schools until, somebody came with me one day and they were like, I can't believe what really goes on. And I think that message would get across and people would understand that they don't ever want to be subject to that, have family members subject to that, or have any threats against their families. I think it's very important to protect and give you guys a sense of security and safety. And the most troubling thing for me is the fact that you said that you were not safe outside of your job in the community because you were afraid that something was going to happen to you or your families. Let's really think about that. Imagine if we, as legislators, were in that situation. I guarantee you they would make changes immediately. I'm hoping that they see the imperativeness of this and do this. And again, I am so sorry you went through that. And, anything that we can do to assist is absolutely imperative for your safety, well-being, mental health, and to make sure that we are doing our job as legislators, protecting those that are protecting the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Schimpsky.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry I was late. It was the only time the county executive could have something. But there are so many levels where this is so wrong, right? You should not have to put up with that. Nobody should have to put up with that. But the one thing you were talking that was being discussed about your fear on the outside is we have to remember that the people who are in there are likely to be coming out in a relatively short period of time, which means if they are, number one, if they are really predatory, that can definitely follow, that can, once they get out. But the behavior that's being modeled for everyone else in the facility, that's, they've often said, and many times our penal system is the school for criminals because they learn from each other. And Lord knows the last thing we want is to have more people learn how to behave like this.
Yes.
I think that, this bill is a good idea. If the third degree stalking is the best way to get to the pre-physical, that's obviously something we have to do. But I think we also have to, I think Chris tried to get at something system-wide, and you were all talking about removal of different privileges that do not have certain constitutional or human rights protections to them, to try to model the behavior. But I think this is something that really does have to be thought about in a comprehensive way, because once people feel they could do that, you've already let the genie out of the bottle. The question is how you create a society with people who, in most cases, especially, and I'll accept your friendly amendment, after bail reform, you have a greater concentration of people with certain types of either mental health issues or predatory personalities or whatever. And I think that we need to do these, but we need to look at it more systematically as well and think about what we could do from a social science perspective to try to move the culture somewhat.
Thank you. Did you wanna respond?
I just wanted to piggyback on that. You know, it was funny because Ms. Simon and I were waiting outside, and how many inmates did we, former inmates did we pass?
Just parking my car right there in front of the post office, and there's one across the street on 1G. He was just got out. He was on 1G,
With psych issues.
which is
Yeah.
psych.
yes.
Oh,
Then
great.
there's another one that crossed the street. He was on 2K, which is psych.
You know, the shelter's close by, so it's time for them out of the shelter, but 3 or 4 we ran into
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which just, you know, just adds to your story. And if I could just add one more thing.
Yes, go right ahead.
When Ms. Simon was telling the story about being groped by,
I wanted to. I'm sorry.
okay. He was given a ticket and then you had to work, come on a block out, tell
So
them.
that's what I just wanted. I didn't get to. I got really emotional because honestly, it still affects me. Like I said, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't feel threatened because I defended myself. I pushed him back immediately. I called the supervisor who was right next door. That's why I didn't push my button and call for the team to come up. Supervisor came right over and he kind of handled the situation. But I felt violated. I didn't understand at that moment, like, why me? I took it personal. I felt like he took my power away. And being an officer, that's
not a
pretty
good thing.
much
Correct.
what we have. That's all I have. That my authority is what I walk in there with, and that's how I do my job. And at that moment, I felt like he took it away from me, and he took it away from me in front of everybody, and it bothered me. And so now I had the next day off, but then to have to go back in there and work these same blocks with these same, and mind you, I had to work the rest of that night. The rest of that night, I had to work. No one asked me if I was okay. No one, the supervisor, my immediate supervisor, didn't even want to pursue it. I had to go down that night to the captain and tell him, I don't feel right about this. I wrote my paperwork. He said, let me look at the camera and I'll get back to you. He looked at the camera, he called me and he said to me, write this up. He did it intentionally. But it shouldn't have been like that. It should have automatically been, are you okay? Let me look at this. No one asked me if I was okay. So now I'm feeling violated. I'm feeling like my power was taken away. And no one
said no one has your back.
No one had my back. No one asked me anything.
And that's what hurts.
And that is what hurt me the most.
Yeah.
That really hurt. That bothered me 100%. And then I have to work the rest of that night and I have to be okay. And I have to go home and I broke down and I started crying. And it wasn't okay and it's not okay. It's not.
Honestly, if there's a physical altercation between officers, male inmate and officer, whatever the case may be, Officer Simon is expected to respond. You better do something. That's your fellow officer in there. And I don't know if it's a lack of comprehension amongst some of our male coworkers or whoever. And like I said, just
Even some
jail
of the
culture
females.
right now, they don't understand that some of these hits and threats hit just as hard, especially to your mental health, as being assaulted. And I've said it several times. I would rather, honestly, God forbid it happens, be physically assaulted than to be told, hey, I know you used to live on Elm Street in Yonkers. Let me catch you over there and I'll grab you up.
So now today, I walk into 2 Northwest and he's sitting right there. And because it was never dealt with before, and I have 3 kids, I'm a single mom. I have to walk in and still be professional and still have my power and still maintain my power with, like I said, there's no barriers, there's no personal space, and do my job with him sitting right there. And I did it because this is what I have to do. But it's hard. It's really hard. And because like nothing happened to him before but a ticket and some key block time.
What stops him from doing it?
What stops him from doing it again?
For the next man who saw him do it.
Or the next person who
Which
saw him
is-
do it.
Correct.
the
which
whole
you mentioned, yeah.
educational thing. But you obviously at least partly answered the question, but what is done for the corrections officers who have been assaulted or otherwise threatened? You know, obviously there's the mental health piece for you. There's also the security piece, and there's also the piece that you all brought up, which is how do we make sure that the rest of the culture has your back? Who's enforcing that?
Today's a big step because you're hearing our voices, right? And it's not just here, it's on the state level as well. You hear the advocates' voices. When we come too late and we try to sit at a table, discussion is where you see, and this is why today was a perfect forum. You got to not just hear me, you got to hear three people that live this, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like even Halt's not done properly. You know, we have him, and that's a whole different, we could sit here a whole nother day and talk about that. There's inmates that are more comfortable in a shoe out environment. They're scared of the population around them. You've taken that tool, not you, the state has taken that tool away from them. So now they have to go, okay, now I gotta really hurt the officer so I can go where I wanna be. You know, because the state says, you don't deserve to be there, you deserve to be here, be free. And they're like, I don't wanna be free. I killed his brother last week. I wanna be locked up in that safety net. And it just, we have one perpetual inmate that comes back all the time. He either assaults an officer to go in his shoe, or he breaks a light fixture and swallows pieces, but he's got to do enough damage to something or someone to be able to be put in there. And that's what the legislator, and again, I'm not attacking you all, they don't hear that side of it. And that's why I appreciate you listening to us today.
Legislator Alvarado?
I had never heard this, and I don't want to belabor the point. I think it's atrocious. I think it's horrible. And the change that the commissioner needs to do his job needs to happen at the state level. But as the majority leader mentioned, the vice chairwoman and all colleagues have mentioned this. Look, I want to challenge. We're Westchester. We're different. And we do it as best as we can. So I want to challenge the department to show us what we can do in-house to make sure that not just female officers, every officer feels a bit safe. And what can we do to sort of change the culture, but at the same time affect this? It's intolerable. And come on, let's lead by example. I could think of a tech that left his job just a few months ago at Rikers Island because he couldn't tolerate the abuse from the inmates in there. And this is a male tech that couldn't handle it. So I can only begin to imagine what women go through. And we have to make it safer for all employees. And it starts with us. So, Commissioner, I challenge you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be challenged, especially when.
No, but
when
you have a
I'm
great
happy
partner.
to-
Your
Alvarado,
former deputy.
Legislator Alvarado.
The former
I'm happy-
deputy is now the commissioner in New York City.
I said I'm happy to be challenged. You know, when it comes to operational safety. When it comes to operational safety, I will show you graphs that over the past 4 years, we have statistically improved operational safety here. When it comes to what we're talking about here, listen to the entire story. The internal disciplinary processes have been watered down over the course of the past 3 years. Don't forget that part of the story. The part of the story that our female correction officers are telling, where they're not getting the support from our supervisors, is unacceptable, and it flies in the face of the way we're doing business here. And Neil Pallone will tell you, when those incidents are brought to my attention, or Deputy Commissioner Diaz, they are dealt with because we hold everyone accountable here. Supporting our correction officers is not optional. It's part of our supervisor's core responsibility. And when they deviate from their core responsibility, I promise you, I take care of it. So, you know, what we can do here, and it's not going to be an easy lift. Remember what I said, for the past 3 years, the internal disciplinary processes have been watered down. And it's nice to talk about taking away privileges. Most of that has gone away. CCDS?
Correct. That's part of 7075, which is a minimum standard. And it talks about deprivation of essential services, where you can't take those primary visits, phone calls. You can't take those things away from people. You can only take one visit away from them out of 2 a week, and that's if the incident is related to a visit. You cannot take packages away from them. So we're very limited in what we can do. And Neil can tell you, when these disciplinary changes were happening, I presented myself to say, like you said, Mr. Alvarado, Westchester, we're the leader. Have them come down here. Have them see what we do here, right? It's not what other jails are doing. We're the leader in the space. We're not being inhumane, right? Let's fight this, and let's present a good argument, and nothing happened.
Within the current rules, I can assure all of you that we will aggressively apply what deterrents and resources are available to us. But as you've heard over the course of the last hour, we need more. And that's where you can be helpful. Operationally, we can manage these things. And if these incidents are brought to the attention of senior management where somebody did file a disciplinary report and they feel that it was inappropriately handled, there's no one who's going to come in front of you and saying we ignore it. We don't ignore those sort of things. We support our workforce. And those who don't support every of our workforce, I promise you there's a downside for them.
Thank you. I really think that we need to continue this discussion. This lends itself to another meeting. This had gone on. I want to thank our visitors for coming. It was very brave of you to come and actually talk about your personal experiences, which were unbelievable. And for me, a bit heart-wrenching as a female to hear that you have to go into a job and you have to be violated in this way is very difficult. And so I'm hoping that what they're doing on the state level and a way that we can support this, but I do think that we're going to have another meeting to continue to discuss this.
My ladies would love that, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, so, yes, did anybody have, okay. Nancy, did you have another question? Nancy, go ahead, Nancy. You spoke out of turn.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I got it. Unmuted. Two quick things. One is about mental health. I just want to say I'm making myself really a boring nag about this, but we need better mental health services for everyone, including all of our employees at the whole county level. And that certainly includes anybody in corrections. I mean, this is a national problem on so many different levels, but certainly if you're in a career like this, it should be readily available, it should be covered, and it should be something that you can access anytime you need it. That's number one. That's for everybody, all across the board, but certainly here. And the other thing is just not to belabor the point that's been made, and I will say, and I've said it again before, I have a lot of respect for our corrections department overall and for our commissioner. I think, we always hear about a lot of great things that go on there. We've had tours, we've been to events. But I do think in general, we've seen it in police departments, we've seen it in fire departments, we've seen it in pretty much anything where we've seen it in sadly in our, in our district attorney's office. Yeah, don't take it the wrong way, but our district attorney prior to our current, jobs that have been traditionally held by men, when women start to go into those jobs, there are different issues that were not contemplated before because the men didn't have to deal with those kinds of things like what we've heard today. And it's very hard for, I don't know why it's so hard, but it is hard to get that across to the men that this is a different, thing. And I think the response has always been kind of like, well, and I don't mean just in corrections, in all of these things, well, suck it up. You wanted to do this job. You should do it. We can take it. Why can't you? If not, then women shouldn't be in those jobs. That's not the right answer. And I think we know that now in 2022. That is not the right answer. If there are impediments, then they need to be dealt with. They need to be taken seriously. And I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Spanner, and I believe you. I believe you will take them seriously, and you have to the extent you've been aware of them. But you need to make it very clear to everybody on your staff that you want to know about this, that if you hear about this, there will be consequences to the staff, the male staff that are not paying attention or taking it seriously. That's it. And I agree. I'd love to continue this conversation another time. But thank you so much, all of you, for being here, and for Madam Chair for letting me speak.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Just quickly, my appointment's calling me. Do you have something that you wanted to?
Yeah, a question which I think may lead to at least making some more substantive progress here. So I think, so was I right to hear that you're not being encouraged to see, this is a piece of paper, it's worth nothing if it's not enforced, right? So I'm reading that you're not being encouraged to enforce this kind of law. Yes. That you're not, so if we can agree that these officers should not be discouraged, in fact, should be encouraged to make criminal complaints in these situations, I think we move a long way. And, Nancy, I don't know how much you know about my past civil practice, but I've represented women employees in these situations. And I'll go as far to say, representative of the county, if you're encountering that kind of situation, I would be concerned about our legal standing as a county in relation to you and in your employment, among all other things that's wrong with what's happening. So I would like, Commissioner, is there any policy or any reason you discourage people from filing criminal complaints under these situations?
Mr. Marr.
I'm gonna let DC Diaz respond to that.
So just so you understand, we have a special investigation unit that works. We have a county detective that's assigned. We actually pay his line so that he's at the jail at all times to help file criminal cases against any residents that violate a penal law code. But there are no statutes in the penal law that allow for us to charge criminally, and that's why Neil's looking for these changes for the actions that are being committed right now, right?
I'm talking about you. I'm talking about going to the DA's office, and I can't see the DA turning down these cases. As long as
we have the charter for Westchester County is that the Department of Public Safety has legal authority at the county jail. So all cases go through county police. And you have to have a code that you can charge under. So we're not dissuading people from doing it, but if there's no penal code that you can attach it to, that's why we're here today, to try to change these laws where we can add language for correction officers.
Legislator Murphy, if you don't mind.
These are not crimes now?
I think that, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I think what he's saying is that in circumstances where a person is incarcerated and saying, like in their cell and saying and or doing some of these things, it currently does not fit under the penal law. I think that's, if I'm hearing you correctly.
That's correct.
It's enhancing it, yes, and also including, like we discussed about with the penal code. Who's dissuading it is the laws that have been pushed and watered down, like as far as the disciplinary process, right? Again, somebody used to be able to go, you hurt an officer, you went to the SHU. Now you have to do serious bodily harm to go to the SHU. Things have gotten watered down throughout the years.
There couldn't have been criminal prosecution?
I tore my right knee where I needed it replaced. the DA told me, you know what, he's looking at 30 years because he was a kidnapping and sex trafficking. It's really not worth it because they're just gonna hold it, what is it, consecutive or concurrent?
Concurrent.
Concurrent, so when you, that's what they do. Most things are held concurrent, that's one of our things we push for. Give consecutive sentences, as long as you got an open case, you can knock my head off, and you know what you're gonna get?
Concurrent time.
You're gonna get concurrent time, so they're gonna give you 10 more years running concurrent with this.
But I think the question that, Damon, that you're asking, and I think that DC Diaz was explaining, has to do specifically with this issue of whether or not you can charge as stalking under the penal law an inmate in his cell saying, hey, I'm gonna do X, Y, Z for you.
That's
Sounds
what we're
like,
trying to include,
it sounds
yes.
like that may be one of those, odd exceptions to the statute as is now, which is why they're seeking to have it included, language to include those types of actions under the purview of the criminal. I haven't delved into the penal law enough to know one for the other.
But we have, and we conferred with the DA's office, and
I'm not doubting you, Commissioner.
But that's why we recommended adding it to this legislation.
No, I'm not doubting you. I'm just saying I personally don't know, but there's, as a practitioner of criminal defense and one-time prosecutor, there's lots of exceptions to every criminal statute. So it's not surprising that, there would be one to this, and hence they're looking to amend it. And if that's what needs to be done, of course, we support that. Of course, that's a state, the state has the authority to do that. We do not.
But we have hand in the enforcement.
Yes, we appreciate it.
Oversight of the enforcement.
Oh, wow. So this has been an amazing meeting, and I want to thank everybody for their input. And I certainly, President Pallone, if you need to come back, I know you had one other officer that was unable to attend today. So I think we do need to continue this because we need to support the initiative that you're trying to put forth and support what's going on the state level and see what we can do and how we can also enforce it here. Yes, did you have another comment?
And we certainly need to continue talking to our leadership because you all know, you also have a perspective on what works and what doesn't work and what you need to be able to run a place in a particular way. So we need you in the conversation as well.
We welcome those meetings.
Okay, I would like to thank all the participants today. I do appreciate this, and we will schedule another meeting to continue because I do think we do need to continue as well as work towards the end goals to make sure that you have a safe work environment and that there's disciplinary action for these individuals and that they're not just allowed to do whatever and it just flies off into the wind. That's ridiculous. So, no, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And is
And
legislation
thank
open
you
as
for
well?
taking your
Let me-
time
Motion
out.
to close legislation.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let me take the roll call. I am a yes. Legislator Smith?
Yes.
Legislator Alvarado?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I lost some people. Okay, Legislator Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, and nope, that's it. We lost some people. Okay.
Chairwoman Clements, I'm on the phone because I'm at an event, so I also am a yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Legislator Kunzio. Appreciate it.
Okay, and to close legislation, I'm a yes. Legislator Kunzio?
Yes.
Legislator Johnson?
Yes.
Legislator Moore?
Yes.
Legislator Shemsky?
Aye.
All right, we have enough to close.
Okay.
Well, it's a good thing we
We're
have to sit
adjourned.
here the rest of the
Okay,
week.
we're adjourned. Public safety is adjourned at 5:48, April the 5th, 2022. Thank you.
And legislation is adjourned the
Oh, we
same.
have to sign something?
Ditto for legislation.